Hey there, Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Kyle Boone's here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, smash the like button like you're Brandon Davies. You have consent. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, please knock that out while you're here. Let's get into it. So you probably heard Texas officially fired Chris Beard on Thursday for a cause. So his time in Austin is done. On at least two previous episodes of the On College Basketball Podcast, we've already discussed the details as we know them of the night of the alleged incident. Let the record show. I don't want to speak for Kyle Boone, but I believe Texas did the appropriate thing here. I think Kyle believes Texas did the appropriate thing here. It's a sad story with no winners, but there's really no need to say that for the 50th time. So let's decline to be repetitive. Just skip that part and let me ask Strongjaw two questions. Here's the first one. Will Chris Beard ever coach Division I college basketball again?
Very difficult to tell right now. There were some very serious allegations that were made. Obviously, his fiance has recanted those allegations. I still think it would be very difficult to hire him again. That being said, we're talking about a coach who I think was pretty widely considered top 5, top 10 coach in college basketball, coaching a team at Texas that I think was and still is probably a national title contender. And he put those pieces together. So, maybe in a few years, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Chris Beard surfaces again and gets another chance. Right now, it seems very unlikely, just given everything that went down and the allegations that were made. But I think a lot of coaches of his pedigree, even in a similar situation, would get a second chance, and it wouldn't surprise me if Chris Beard was coaching Division I basketball at some point down the road.
I think I'm with you. I don't believe Texas had any real choice here.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you always have a choice, but practically speaking, I think Texas did what it had to do. This is a school that had just found the guy many people believed was perfect for their job. And you're exactly right. In coaching circles and basketball circles, Chris Beard was regarded as one of the very best coaches in the entire country. I talked to NBA people, and when you would sort of pick their brains about coaches, I have had multiple NBA scouts, front office members, tell me over the past few years that, they go to all these practices. They've been in everybody's practice at this point. And the guy who runs the best practices from start to finish is Chris Beard. I've had multiple NBA people tell me that. So this is an immensely talented, basketball coach. And I'm sure if there was a reasonable way to keep him, Texas would have done that. But because the allegations were so disturbing, and because this isn't just a he said, she said thing, that authorities, were called to the residence, and then they, with their own eyes, saw the injuries. Texas did what it had to do, and what I believe what most universities, self-respecting universities at least, would do. But my experience with not necessarily these types of things, but coaches who are forced out, for cheating or for personal life problems or anything in between. It's easy in the moment to say, well, they're done. They'll never coach again. And then you look up and they just are coaching again. Because when you put time between these things, the facts of the case, whatever they are, will never change. But people's willingness to overlook them or to accept the idea that somebody has changed and paid a price and deserves a second chance, that stuff does change. Like right now, I think if you took a poll, should Chris Beard coach Division I basketball again, the overwhelming majority of people would say no. Take that same poll in 5 years, I bet you the numbers look a little different. And so I think he probably will coach again. Never at the level of the University of Texas, but could I see him coaching some small Texas school at the mid-major or low-major level. Yeah, I could absolutely see that. But, to think about how quickly, by your own doing, your life can just, I've made mistakes in my life, but I've never made a mistake where I woke up the next day and went, my life has changed forever and there's nothing I can do about it now. Like, the life I wanted and the life I thought I had is gone. My fault, but boy, I have to start a new life from here, and I'll never get the life back that I had and that I wanted. Fortunately, I've never gone through something like that on a personal level or a professional level, and fingers crossed I never will. But I can't imagine, and this isn't to show any sympathy toward Chris Beard. What he allegedly did is cause for termination. For lack of a better cliche, he is paying the price for his missteps. He is lying in the bed that he made. But I can't imagine what it's like to wake up one day and think, and people do this every day, but I guess I can't imagine it. But boy, it's just hard to wrap your head around. You work your whole life for something, you get it, it's going extremely well, and then you screw it all up in a way that is impossible to repair. That's a scary thing for anybody. And it's, there's a lesson in there for all of us. You can screw your life up with one bad decision. And, so you try to stay away from those bad decisions.
Yep. And the ascension of Chris Beard, I think, was one of the quickest, obviously, in college basketball. I mean, this is the guy who took Arkansas Little Rock to new heights. At Texas Tech, he was doing things that Texas Tech was, literally never doing. And in his second season at Texas, I mean, this is a team that I picked to win the Big 12. They started the season, I believe, number 1 at KenPom. They're in the top 10 of the AP poll right now. They still have a really good team. Rodney Terry's going to have a chance, I think, to win at a high level this season. But yeah, Chris Beard's life is forever changed. I do think at some point we will see him coaching down the road, but I think a lot of that is going to have to play out over the weeks and months ahead, especially with whether or not they do intend to file charges. Obviously, there's a little bit of movement there on that front. Beard's attorney this week, in a statement sent to Texas, said more or less that he believes and expects that there will be no pursuit from the DA in this case. And so, we'll wait to see how that plays out. I think that will go maybe a little ways or maybe a long ways towards determining what happens with Chris Beard down the road. But yeah, it's just a crazy situation all around.
So that was my first question. Will Chris Beard ever coach Division I basketball again? I think we both believe that he will someday at some level below the level at which he was flourishing at Texas. Second question. Who is coaching Texas next season?
I love this question. Marcus Nelson, our great editor, posed this question. I believe.
Best.
Marcus the GOAT, no doubt about it.
He's the GOAT.
We have a lot of great editors, but Marcus is our college basketball editor. Shout out to Marcus.
Yeah, I mean, you look up with Marcus, and he's publishing something, editing something, and publishing it at 8 a.m. And you look up, and it's 2 a.m. and he's doing the same thing. That man works long, hard hours. We're lucky to have him.
He's wild. Yes, we are very fortunate to have Marcus. Shout out to Marcus. We love you. My response when Marcus posed this question was just a picture of John Calipari. And at the time, I'm like, LOL, wouldn't that be funny? And then I think you responded, it's like, that would be kind of interesting. And you think about it a little bit more, and it's like, that was obviously the first one I thought of, because John Calipari, it's like every job that opens, he seems to be mentioned because every program wants John Calipari. At this point, it feels like Kentucky fans would pay for shipping, right? Like they're kind of sick of John Calipari. They're 10-4 this season, which is a disappointment. I think that relative to preseason expectations, kind of continues recent trend of not quite meeting expectations by UK fans. And they have lofty expectations, and I think that's very, very, very fair at the University of Kentucky. But lost to St. Peter's in the NCAA tournament, haven't been to the Final Four since 2015, no Elite Eights since 2018. Their offense looks totally archaic. They have a ton of talent every year, and every year it just feels like they're not quite meeting the expectations. So maybe a refresh or restart could be what Kentucky and Calipari needs. So John Calipari to me is 1A on Texas's wish list. I don't know if he'd be coaching next season at Texas, but he's the one that I think Texas could potentially, like, the one big fish that actually could be realistic.
So I put together a list of Texas candidates last night. You can find it at cbssports.com. And on that list is John Calipari. And immediately from some people, it was like, yeah, but why would the Kentucky coach leave for Texas? And that's an easy thing to say in a vacuum, but we're not in a vacuum here. The context of the situation matters. By the way, there's a Kentucky coach named Tubby Smith who left for Minnesota.
Yeah.
For the exact same reasons, because it had become miserable and unbearable because what you were doing for that school was no longer enough for the fan base. Don't ever forget, like, why would the Kentucky coach leave for Texas? More or less for the same reasons the Kentucky coach left for Minnesota. Because you reach a point, I think we can all agree there is no bigger and more intense fan base than the Kentucky fan base. There are other big and intense fan bases, Indiana, obviously, Kansas, North Carolina. I don't think there's a bigger and more intense fan base than the Kentucky fan base. And when things are going well, I mean, you're a god. There was a time I used to joke, like, because you could put these polls on Twitter, and it would be like, so what's the best home court advantage in America? And Rupp Arena would win it every year. By the way, Rupp Arena is not the best home court advantage in America. Rupp Arena is not the best place to see a college basketball game. But Rupp Arena would win that poll. Why? Because Kentucky fans would take it over. The joke I used to make is like, if you were to ask, put a poll up, who's the greatest Beatle of all time? Paul, John, George, Ringo, or John Calipari. John Calipari would win the poll if Kentucky fans got a hold of it. When you're doing well there, you got a whole army behind you. But when it starts to slip a little bit, or you're no longer doing what you used to do or meeting expectations, it gets real uncomfortable. And I think we've gotten to that place with John at Kentucky. It started, I don't know, you could trace it all the way back to not winning the national championship in 2015, even though they went to the Final Four with a 38-0 record and clearly had the best team in the country. And you can reasonably argue, and not definitively argue, but reasonably argue, if you just play the right people, you win the national championship, instead of trying to play so many people to keep so many people happy. So there's that. Then they haven't been back to the Final Four since 2015. 2 seasons ago, worst in modern Kentucky history, missed the NCAA tournament. Last season, lose to St. Peter's in the first round. This summer, get into a back and forth. I don't know if it's technically a back and forth, but certainly a spat on some level with the Kentucky football coach. And the Kentucky fans largely took the side of the Kentucky football coach. And then you start the season ranked number 1 at KenPom, and you're sitting here on January 6th. Oh, it's January 6th. Just realized it's January 6th. Well, you sit here on January 6th, and you've got no good wins, and your team is undeniably underachieving relative to preseason expectations. Kentucky fans, I don't want to lump them all together, because there's you start with Kentucky fans, and then there's different groups of them, and I'm sure some of them still love and appreciate and adore John Calipari, but whatever that number used to be, it ain't the same anymore. And when John got into that, when the Kentucky football coach went at John this summer on Twitter, and largely Kentucky fans backed the football coach over the basketball coach, I got a phone call from one of John's close friends, and we were just talking about, can you believe this? And John was just trying to get to put some pressure on his athletic director to get a practice facility built, and now it's blown up on him. And this close friend of John said to me, the truth is he should have, and the guy was like, I'm not trying to be, Monday morning quarterback here, because I don't know that I told John then you got to do this. But looking back at it, this person said John should have taken the UCLA job when they fired Steve Alford. He could have been the UCLA coach instead of Mick Cronin. Yeah. And he passed for understandable reasons at the time. But looking back on it, this friend of his said he should have gone. And literally nothing from this summer has changed for the better for John Calipari, other than maybe he's got an incredible recruiting class on the way. But even that, I gather some Kentucky fans are just like shrugging their shoulders, like, oh, we got another great recruiting class on the way. Yeah, every year we got that. And we still got one national championship, haven't been to the Final Four since 2015. Yeah. So I'm not predicting John Calipari is going to be the next head coach at Texas. What I am guaranteeing you is that he would consider it. And I think seriously consider it, because what history tells us is once you lose the fan base, like once they don't believe in you anymore, it becomes very difficult to win them back over. Like, Tom Crean got there at Indiana. Fans turned on him, and then he won a Big Ten title outright. And it was like, okay. But then the next season, some injuries went the wrong way. Boom, fired. It's over. And I don't think John is at risk of being fired, because firing John Calipari would cost Kentucky a lot of money. But your quality of life does matter. And if you are, and some coaches can live in a bubble, but boy, it's hard to do that at Kentucky and not be aware of the criticism and not even bump into it all of the time. And that doesn't only become hard on you, it gets hard for your family. And I think there's a scenario where if this Kentucky team continues to underachieve and loses in the second round of the NCAA tournament, or let's just throw it out there, maybe misses the NCAA tournament. I'm not predicting that, but it's certainly on the table at this point. It's not impossible to imagine. Then for the same reason Shaka Smart left Texas, I could see John Calipari going to Texas because it would give him a fresh set of expectations, a fan base that can see the good as opposed to obsessed with the bad.
Yeah.
And Texas could match him dollar for dollar. Like how many places could pay John Calipari what he makes at Kentucky? I don't know, but Texas can if they want to. So I do think he's a realistic candidate, more realistic for this Texas job, if they want him, than he's ever been for any other job since he took the Kentucky job. Also on the list of candidates, I put Chris Holtmann. Not because I think necessarily Texas is a better job than Ohio State. I actually think they're pretty comparable jobs. Like, they're big schools and the most prominent schools in their states, and they've got unlimited resources. But football matters more at both places. Like, that's Texas, that's Ohio State. So I don't know which job is better, but I do think they're comparable. Maybe more talent in Texas might tip the scales towards Texas, but they're comparable jobs. But Chris Holtmann's great. If I were an Ohio State fan, I would just be happy he's my coach. But if I were to tweet that right now, somebody would quickly reply, hadn't made a Sweet 16 yet. When's he going to the Sweet 16? And, people draw these lines at different places, and if you don't meet them, it becomes a problem for you. But same type of deal. If Ohio State were to lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament and that narrative intensifies and extends, you could see Chris Holtmann maybe, if approached, saying, should I do this just to start fresh? I put Eric Musselman on the list and acknowledge that, when you've got a great job like the Arkansas job and you're doing well at it, that's not the type of guy who typically goes and leaves it. But and I do think Arkansas is a great job, but I would probably rank Texas ahead of it. And then, my friend, our colleague Seth Davis made this point in a list he did for The Athletic that, where you live matters to some coaches. And I say this respectfully. Fayetteville, Arkansas is an amazing college town, but it is a college town. And Austin is an incredible, one of the great American cities. And so that could be something that, makes that possible move compelling. Like, not only do I get to go work at a big time university with unlimited resources and talent all around the state, but my family also gets to live in Austin as opposed to Fayetteville. So that's just something to think about. Coaches don't always make these decisions strictly about basketball. I know one coach, when the Mississippi State job opened, I think after they sort of pushed Rick Stansbury out there was a coach, I don't want to name him, but he interviewed for the job. And I think if he wanted the job, it was his job. And he called me because he knows I live in Mississippi. And he said, talk to me about Starkville, Mississippi. And we were talking through it. And he was like, this coach, at the end of the conversation, he said, I just don't think I can raise my family in Starkville, Mississippi. I just don't think I want to. No, like I have nothing against Mississippi or Mississippi State, but I just don't know if that's the place I want to raise my family in Starkville, Mississippi. And he literally, if he didn't actually turn down the job, he passed on the opportunity to be offered the job because he didn't want to live in that place. And so these are the types of things that factor in sometimes. Also on the list, Royal Ivey, former Texas player, Brooklyn Nets assistant. He was endorsed by Kevin Durant when the job opened last time. Interviewed for the job. Obviously, when you consider hiring somebody who's literally never worked on a college campus, you're open yourself up to some risk, but it doesn't mean it can't work. Penny Hardaway had never worked on a college campus before he got the Memphis job. And, I know that it's been bumpy, but it's pretty solid right now. Coming off an NCAA tournament appearance and got another team that looks like it's going to make the NCAA tournament. So that's another name on the list. But ultimately, to wrap this all up, I think Rodney Terry will be the coaching Texas next season because, he has been, and this is a fascinating situation. This is true for Rodney. Imagine waking up with this on your plate. I'm going to coach for the next 3 months. And if I do this well, I'm probably going to make guaranteed $15 million. And if I don't, I'm going to go be an assistant coach somewhere for $300,000. That is Rodney Terry's life right now. All right. It's your job to lose. And if you knock this thing out of the park, I can lock you in guaranteed $15 million. I'm just throwing out a number, 5 years, $3 million a year. Right.
Yep.
But if you don't do it well, you're back to, making $300,000 a year. Who's got more on the line over the next 3 months than Rodney Terry? But like you pointed out, he has inherited a really talented, experienced team from Chris Beard and just got to keep it between the lines. Now, the Big 12 can eat you up. You gotta do the job. Just having good players ain't good enough because most teams have good players. But if he does this job well enough, and I think that he will, I think Rodney Terry, raised in Texas, spent, a decade or so on Rick Barnes' staff at Texas. He knows his surroundings. He's comfortable in his surroundings. He's well-liked. I don't know if you know Rodney, but I've known Rodney for, somewhere between 15 and 20 years. Great guy. I mean, just like the best in terms of easy to get along with, easy to talk to. I'm sure he has allies on that campus within that athletic department. And if he does well enough, and I think that he will, I think he'll have the opportunity to keep that job.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's probably the favorite at this point, so long as he, like you said, could keep it between the lines. And Texas makes a run this season, would put him as the front runner to win that job. A couple that you mentioned in your column that I will just highlight as well. We talked about all of them actually. Jerome Tang was the final one.
I'm glad you brought that up. Go ahead.
He was the one that you hadn't mentioned yet. I really like that one. Obviously, he just took over his first program as a head coach at Kansas State after serving 19 seasons at Baylor as kind of Scott Drew's right-hand man, lieutenant. Dude can clearly coach. I mean, Kansas State has been pretty mediocre, kind of middle to bottom feeder in the Big 12 for a really long time. Kansas State's 13-1 to start the year. He seems to just sometimes you just know when a coach just has it, and it seems like he has it. You highlighted obviously like the chances of, or the likelihood that any coach goes to one program and just goes and leaves after 1 year is not likely. And I'd be kind of surprised if Jerome Tang took the Kansas State job and then just left. But Texas is a job where you leave for after 1 year if it's available to you.
Yeah, let's just stop there for a second. Because a couple of points. First off, it is not normal to take a job and leave 1 year later. But if the job you have is the Kansas State job and the job you get offered is the Texas job, well, then you leave after 1 year.
Yeah.
I don't know that Jerome Tang would ever be offered the Kansas job. The Texas job.
Right.
I can't imagine he would be offered the Texas job and not take the Texas job. And I had some people last night when I put Jerome on the list say, come on, he's coached a half a season. Let's slow it down. Well, can I remind you that Arizona hired a coach who had never been a head coach? That's the Arizona basketball. Hired somebody who had never been a head coach, and that's going brilliantly. Yeah. So, Jerome was working in the state of Texas for nearly 20 years, side by side with Scott Drew. He knows what winning in the Big 12 looks like. He helped build that program from nothing into a actual national champion. And if he continues to do well this year at Kansas State, I could, and Rodney Terry falls short of expectations and the job actually opens, I would be, I think Jerome Tang would have to be somebody you'd be interested in if you're at the University of Texas. I'm sort of looking through the YouTube comments here, and the name Rick Pitino comes up. Let me just say this. I think Rick Pitino is amazing. I think Rick Pitino is going to coach at the high major level again. If I were St. John's and my job opened up, I would offer it to Rick Pitino. I'm not sure at the University of Texas, when you just fired a coach because of a personal life scandal, I don't know that you can hire another coach who has had personal life scandals. And I know Rick's story is vastly different than Chris Beard's story. I'm not comparing the two other than putting them under the umbrella of personal life scandals. And I just don't think if you're Texas, you can go down that path right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. Two more I will add to this candidates list that you did not include in your column. Not sure how realistic they are, but TJ Otzelberger turned a 2-22 Iowa State program into a tournament team in his first year. They won 22 games, advanced to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. Iowa State is surprising 11-2 to start the year. A lot of sample size that Otzelberger is a really, really good basketball coach. He was really good at South Dakota State. Obviously, that's why he won the Iowa State gig. And so far, Iowa State, I don't think anyone expected they'd be 11-2 to start the year, but they look like they're not dropping off from last season and on track to, again, make the NCAA tournament. And then the second one, which I think is probably less realistic than Otzelberger and maybe by a lot, Dan Hurley. He's done really well for himself at the UConn job, turned the Huskies around in a hurry. They were a tourney team the last two seasons. Obviously look like they could be a 2 or a 3 seed or maybe even a 1 seed if they figure things out. UConn isn't the same job that it once was early in the 2000s, and I think Texas is a better job with better resources. Now, would he leave UConn? I kind of doubt it. Would he fit culturally at Texas? I'm not entirely sure, but also, would it matter? Does it matter? I mean, if you're going to get paid double what you're making at UConn, maybe Dan Hurley takes a look there. That's kind of a long shot that I thought that could be interesting.
Yeah, I would, if I were making a longer list, I would put those guys on it. Certainly I'd make a phone call to Dan. I mean, you'd be asking him to, this is a guy who is from up there, as they say, to go into the deep South, the heart of Texas. That's fine. You don't have to be defined by where you grew up or where you've worked. I think great basketball coaches work anywhere. You could take, if somebody's great, circling back to John Calipari, John Calipari has been super successful at UMass, so in New England, and also in Memphis, sort of in the middle of the SEC, certainly the South. And now, in Lexington, Kentucky as well. So I think great coaches can be great anywhere. That wouldn't concern me. But, I don't know that Dan would want to move to Texas, but it's a lot of money and it's a great job. It'd certainly be worth a phone call. TJ Otzelberger is really good name. And another one is Nate Oates at Alabama. He makes a lot of money, big buyout, all that stuff. But I think Nate is terrific. He's really figured out how to modernize his style of play at Alabama and in ways that, frankly, other coaches haven't quite been able to figure out. And if I'm not just removing the interim tag from Rodney Terry and handing him the job full time, and I'm putting a list together, Nate Oates would be on that list of people I would want to talk to. Also in the YouTube comments, Dennis Gates at Missouri. Yeah, absolutely. And this isn't, I know with Jerome Tang, you can say, yeah, first year at Kansas State, he's only coached half a season. With Dennis Gates, like there is a track record of winning somewhere else. You know, he was successful at Cleveland State, and now he's, you know, killing it at Missouri. So these are all reasonable candidates. You know, we'll revisit it, I'm certain at some point, but for now, if I had to handicap this thing, I would probably make Rodney Terry the leader to be Texas coach next season, strictly because he's already in position to get the job. He just has to not screw this up. And as long as he doesn't screw it up, I think he's the most likely guy, you know, coaching game one in the 2023-24 season.
And the chaos hire would be Mark Adams, right? Texas just goes and hires Texas Tech's coach again, and then Texas Tech fans are just okay.
I don't think Texas will hire Mark Adams, but oh boy. Yeah, that'd be fun on the internet.
Yes.
I don't know that that's realistic. In fact, I'd be shocked, but it would be fun. It'd be fun on the internet for sure. Let's move on. Providence is alone atop the Big East standings despite returning 0 starters from last season's team. We're going to touch on the Friars next, but first a word from our partners.
We are charged to protect these kids.
Go. I'm a police officer for North Minneapolis and coach for North High School. Go. These kids don't trust cops.
It's definitely a difficult time right now.
Kind of weird, but I'm building bonds with police.
The violence is nonstop. You can hear the gunshots. When them lights flicker at 7 o'clock, you ain't hearing none of that.
So surprise, surprise, Providence is alone atop the Big East standings despite returning 0 starters from last season's team. Friars are 13-3. They're on an 8-game winning streak, 5-0 in the Big East. Strong jaw. Is it too early to get excited, or are you a believer in what Ed Cooley is doing once again?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you know this or not, GP, but I actually studied advanced sciences in college. And one thing that I found pretty interesting doing some research here, did you know you actually cannot spell Ed Cooley without the word cool?
I never thought about it, but that seems obvious to me. Sure.
Coincidence, or is it? Oh, I feel like we should have seen this coming. I mean, Providence is atop the Big East standings. Ed Cooley doing his thing. Once again, we completely underrated him. Last season, they were kind of the sleeper of the Big East last year. This year, it looks like they are again a contender, despite, you know, losing a lot of really, really important pieces. Justin Minaya, Al Durham, Nate Watson. I'm not surprised, but the way in which they have got to the top of the Big East, I think, is most surprising. They've cruised past DePaul on the road. On January 1st, they won by double digits over UConn 3 days later. So it's really impressive. I think that Cooley, continues to be vastly underrated. The way he's pieced together this roster, I mean, deserves a ton of credit. Picked Bryce Hopkins off from Kentucky after averaging like 2 points and playing 6.5 minutes per game in one season with the Wildcats. And now he's leading Providence this season, 16.4 points per game, 9.2 rebounds per game. Just a total revelation with the Friars, and I'm sure infuriating for Kentucky fans. Devin Carter, another SEC transfer, this one from South Carolina, second leading scorer on the team, third in steals among all Big East players. So this team is legit. I don't think it's a fluke. Maybe we should have seen this coming, but Providence, rocking and rolling right now. They look like one of the best in the Big East. Yeah,
like I said, they lose all 5 starters from last season's team, and they were picked 5th, I think reasonably picked 5th in the Big East behind Creighton, Xavier, Villanova, and UConn. And like I wrote in the lead of the top 25 and 1 on Thursday morning, like they might finish 5th. You know, there's a long way to go, and there's obviously really good teams in the Big East. A good team, an NCAA tournament team, is going to finish 5th in the Big East probably. So that prediction might look right, in a month or maybe in 2 weeks, but it's hard not to take note of what Ed has been able to do with this team so far this season. Most recently, of course, beating UConn and extending the Huskies losing streak to 2 games. And the star of it being Bryce Hopkins is just like, if you're a Kentucky fan, I don't know if it makes you sick, but it's another thing where if you're now actively looking for things to be frustrated with about John Calipari, well, then there's another one right there. Like, hold up. This guy, you had him in your program last season, and he played 6.4 minutes per game. 6.4 minutes per game. And now he goes to Providence, in part because he only played 6.4 minutes per game, and he's averaging 16.4 points, 9.2 rebounds in 33.1 minutes per game. Like, what did Ed Cooley see in Bryce Hopkins to unleash this that John Calipari did not? I don't know the answer to that question. I ask it from an honest place. And obviously at Kentucky, year in and year out, you're going to have a lot of really talented guys. But Bryce Hopkins is like a legitimate candidate for Big East Player of the Year right now.
Yeah.
And, in theory, there's a scenario where he could be on Kentucky's team and would, probably be Kentucky's second best player. But Kentucky didn't value him the way that he needed to be valued to be convinced to stay there. And so now he's starring at Providence, and I'm sure Providence fans are thrilled, and Kentucky fans are a little, scratching their heads a little bit, wondering what could have been. A lot like Johnny Juzang leaves Kentucky, goes to UCLA, All-American. Cal Wilcher leaves Kentucky, goes to Gonzaga, All-American. The latest example that appears to be Bryce Hopkins.
And by the way, Keon Brooks transfer from Kentucky. He's with Washington this season, averaging 16.2 points per game. That's by far a career high. It's a 5th best among Pac-12 players. Having a career year could be potentially I don't think he's the front runner, but I think he's certainly a contender for Pac-12 Player of the Year. So there's 2 Kentucky transfers who could go on to either contend or actually win Player of the Year honors in their respective new conferences. Got to sting if you're a Kentucky fan.
All right. Before we get to the Final Four and 1, we'll do some predictions here, get based on the conversation we're having, and we'll see how they look in 2 months. The Big East champion will be.
It's going to be UConn.
I think that would still be my pick as well, but I'm not going to get caught doubting Ed Cooley again. And Xavier. I mean, right now you got to listen. I think UConn's the best team in the Big East, but UConn is also 3-2 in the Big East, while Providence is sitting there at 5-0 and 4-0. Now, again, long way to go. We're going to end up playing 20 Big East games, but Providence is already a quarter of its way through its Big East schedule, and if we're both predicting UConn to pass them, well, they got to make up some ground. They got to make up some ground with only 75% of the schedule left. So I do think UConn's the best team in the Big East, but I'm not sure UConn is going to win the Big East. Although, if I were predicting this last week or today, I would still probably go with the Huskies. Yeah.
Xavier very much in the mix too. 4-0 in Big East play. They just knocked off UConn before the end of the year. I feel like I should say that because I know Matt Norlander's all over Xavier in the preseason. They're very much going to be in the mix as well.
All right, let's get to the Final Four and 1. I think if I remember correctly, we opened Monday's show. I opened Monday's show celebrating my accomplishments from last week, and I think I'm 21. I think I'm 21, 15, and 1. And so is Deadleg. Is that correct?
Yeah, you guys are tied at 21, 15, and 1.
21.
After a amazing weekend. 21. Might be your best weekend ever doing the Final Four and 1.
Wow. And maybe by extension, my best weekend ever. Like maybe just my best weekend I've ever had. Broadly speaking.
I won't go that far. I know, again, you've told too many stories to where that might be your best weekend ever.
Yeah, I don't even remember what I did last weekend. I'm confident it wasn't my best weekend ever, but I did pick games correctly. So that was nice. We're going to put that in the plus column. All right. You know how the Final Four and one normally works. Normally, I pick 4 games, and then Norlander would pick the 5th, like sort of on the fly. But here's the deal: Norlander wanted to pick these games this weekend, even though, and I should say, we didn't fire him. He's not fired. He's just on he does an annual skiing trip with his family, and once a weekend. Once a year in the weekend during college basketball season, and that is happening like right now. Like I think Deadleg is on the slopes right now. So he wasn't going to be here for this episode, and there'll be a weekend coming up where I'm going to have to do something similar. But he wanted to still pick the games for the weekend so that we would have the same number of picks throughout the season. So what I did is I picked all 5 games. Sue me. I picked all 5 games so that I could send them to Strongjaw and Deadleg last night. And Norlander, I'm sure will turn his picks in to me and Nada at some point before these games tip off this weekend. Let's start with game 1. It's Saturday, noon Eastern. Creighton at number 4, UConn, inside Josh Knockhamson Pavilion. Josh Knockhamson Pavilion. You can watch it on Fox. KenPom has it. UConn -9.
GP, I got a question for you. Did you retire the strrr?
Yeah, I think I just get I come up with these things and then I get bored with them and then I just forget about them. But I could bring that back at any time. I can stay on your toes. I could bring that up at any time.
Okay, I'm gonna need you to call it up because I'm going Creighton. Strrr. Give it
straight up.
Creighton over UConn. The big upset of the weekend. UConn is struggling right now. They've lost 2 straight. Creighton has won 3 straight by double figures. They're humming right now. I think they match up really well with UConn. Kalkbrenner at full strength. I think this team can beat anyone. I think we get some Maui Creighton back into the mix on Saturday. So I like Creighton in this spot.
Yeah, I think this number is in. Like, I don't think the actual number. And the reason we use KenPom on Friday is because on Friday morning, the lines for the Saturday games haven't usually been posted yet. So we just have to rely on the KenPom numbers. I don't think the actual number will be -9 because some of that -9 is baked into that is Creighton took some bad losses, but Ryan Kalkbrenner didn't play in I think 2 of those games. Like where Creighton started to really slip is when they didn't have their best player. Surprise, surprise. Yeah. So I don't think the number will be -9, and but for our purposes it is, and I will take Creighton plus the 9. I think that number is just a little too big. I do not think Creighton goes to UConn and wins, but I think they stay inside that number. Game 2 Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern. Kentucky at number 7 Alabama inside Albert Means Coliseum. You can watch it on ESPN. KenPom has it. Alabama -6.
Alabama here is the pick for me. I will take the points with Bama. I think it's something like a 74-70 type game. Kentucky's just wandering through the wilderness right now on offense. This team just seems a bit off, not totally clicking. I'm not sure if I feel like we've been waiting for Kentucky to kind of beat Kentucky, and they just aren't. And maybe that starts clicking, but I don't think it's against Alabama. They will absolutely light up Kentucky on offense, and defensively, I think they'll present enough challenges that they get it done here. It's reasonably close, but Alabama wins it.
You know how many road wins Kentucky has so far this season?
28.
0.
God, I knew it.
They have not won a road. I liked your answer though. I often, when I don't know the answer, just throw out something absurd. Like my answer for nearly every question when it comes to, so who was the last team to do this, or who was the first team to do whatever? If I just go UMass Lowell. I just always guess UMass Lowell. It's it's gonna be right one day, but I don't think it's been right so far. Kentucky hasn't won a road game all season. I was talking to somebody, and in fairness, they've only played 2, but they lost both by double digits. By 16 points at Gonzaga, and even though that wasn't technically a road game, that was neutral site. That's not in the kennel. And then they lost. Got blown out at Missouri. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day. When you start looking at most of the teams that get put on these disappointing lists. It's like, well, they started out good and then kind of turned on them, or they started out bad, but they look like they're getting better. Kentucky hasn't looked good all year.
No,
Kentucky hasn't looked good all year, and like we're 14 games into this thing, and they haven't looked good all year. They haven't beaten what I think's a good team all year, and they've shown no ability. They haven't shown anything. I'll just keep while prefacing it's basketball. Who the hell knows? But they've shown nothing that makes you think they're going to go to Alabama and win this game and perhaps even be competitive. I'll lay the points. I'll go Alabama -6. I think maybe Kentucky's competitive for a little while, but I think ultimately Alabama covers that number and maybe wins by double digits. Game 3 Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern, number 25 Iowa State at number 17 TCU inside Desmond Bain Arena. You can watch it on ESPNU. KenPom's got it TCU -3.
Gonna lay the points here with TCU. 4th longest win streak in college hoops right now. TCU does. Lots of talent with Mike Miles, Manuel Miller, Damian Baugh. I think TCU gets it done with all due respect to future Texas coach TJ Otzelberger. I like TCU in the spot.
You know what's wild is that TCU started the season ranked. They didn't have Damian Baugh. Didn't have Mike Miles, and they lost a game to Northwestern State. 64-63 at home. They lost a 1-point game to Northwestern State. It's a horrific loss. Northwestern State is 276 at KenPom. But again, they were missing 2 of their top 3 scores. All right? Now, that's no excuse. You should beat Northwestern State even without Damian Baugh and Mike Miles. But it is a fact that they didn't have Damian Baugh and Mike Miles. I think if they even have one of those dudes, they don't lose that game. All right? So TCU is a Damian Baugh being available or a Mike Miles being available or merely one bucket, one more shot going in or one more defensive stop from being right now 14-0. And they'd be 14-0 with wins over Baylor, Texas Tech, Providence, and Iowa. They would be getting first place votes in the AP poll. If not for the Northwestern State thing that I just explained happened because they were severely shorthanded. So I sort of course corrected with them in the top 25 and 1 after they went and won at Baylor on Wednesday night. Because I had sort of had them, I think, in the 20s, just based on, hey, listen, that loss is a loss. I'm not going to spend every morning going back through everybody's games played and saying, okay, but this team lost this game when so-and-so wasn't playing. Just losses are losses, wins are wins for the most part for my purposes. But I adjusted for TCU after the win at Baylor because they look like one of the best teams in the country. I jumped them up to their 12 in Friday morning's top 25 and 1, but they would maybe be number 1 and certainly in the top 5 at this point if that Northwestern State game did not exist. I'm with you. I'm going to lay the points with TCU and expect them to extend that winning streak with a win over Iowa State. Game 4 Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Kansas State at number 19 Baylor inside the Huck Center. You can watch it on ESPN+. KenPom has it Baylor -5.
I am again laying the points with the home favorite with Baylor. My king, Keontae George, coming off a career-high 27 points versus TCU. The weapons Baylor has in this backcourt is comical. Flagler, George, LJ Cryer. I think they snapped their 2-game skid, get back in the win column.
I'm going to take the points.
Yeah.
I'm a believer in Kansas State. Like, they were picked last in the Big 12. And I went and looked, and I want to be clear. They're Big 12 coaches poll preseason. The coaches voted. Pick Kansas State last. CBS Sports. Me, you, David Cobb, Matt Norlander, I believe Jerry Palm. We all projected the Big 12 standings. Yeah. Every one of us picked Kansas State last. And so clearly, we're going to – I don't want to say clearly because – at this point, any Big 12 team could finish last still, including I don't think Texas would. I don't think Kansas would. Any Big 12 team besides Kansas could theoretically finish last because right now this is true. A top 40 KenPom team, or at least a team that is ranked in the top 40 at KenPom right now, has to finish last in the Big 12. Has to. Somebody's got to finish last. And it might end up being Kansas State, because, again, there's nothing but good teams in this league. But at this point, it looks like it's unlikely to be Kansas State. I don't think the Wildcats are going to finish last. And when you start to look at their roster, like, okay, who are they doing this with? Well, let's start with Keontae Johnson, who was the preseason SEC Player of the Year a few years ago before he was sidelined by a medical condition. So that's a guy who's super talented, old now relative to college basketball. And it shouldn't be surprising that he looks like a Big 12 Player of the Year candidate. Marquise Noel is an awesome college basketball player. Desi Sells was a starter for an Elite Eight team at Arkansas. These are real players. And maybe we were dismissive of it in the preseason, the coaches as well, because you don't know what are you going to get from Keontae Johnson? I had no idea. But he's great. Noel is tremendous. Desi Sells is, like I said, started for an Elite Eight. This isn't fluky, I don't think. I think they're legitimately good. And so, yeah, I guess I'd assume Baylor wins the game, but I'm going to take Kansas State plus the points and trust them to stay inside that number. And if they go down there and win, I don't think that's the craziest thing in the world. Jerome Tang's got a good team. Game 5, Saturday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Number 13, Arkansas at number 22, Auburn, inside Chris Porter Arena. You can watch it on the SEC Network. KenPom has it, Arkansas -1.
You don't just walk into Chris Porter Arena, do you?
That's tough. I tell you, when people put together a list of great college basketball home court advantages, it usually starts with Allen Fieldhouse, Cameron Indoor, the Kennel. I did a game at Auburn. I did the Auburn-Kentucky game on the sideline for CBS Sports last season. Historically, it doesn't belong in the same conversation. In that moment, on that day, it's as good as it gets. And this season, it has largely been as good as it gets. It's a really significant home court advantage. And it's why I would, and I'll get your pick in just a second. I'm going to take Auburn here. I don't think Auburn's better than Arkansas, but I think Auburn can beat Arkansas at home, while Arkansas is also presumably playing without two of its top 4 players. Trayvon Brazile sidelined for the year with ACL, and Nick Smith Jr. still dealing with a lingering knee issue that has him out indefinitely. I'm leaving open the possibility you'll just turn your TV on this weekend and Nick Smith Jr. is playing. I don't think that's true, though. There's starting to be growing speculation in basketball circles. I wonder if you've heard this, that he might not play again at Arkansas. Just sort of call it a college career and heal up and get ready for the NBA draft. Well, he'll certainly go in the top 10, whether he ever plays. Maybe I shouldn't say certainly, but probably goes in the top 10, whether he ever plays another minute at Arkansas or not. So take everything you thought you knew about Arkansas and now remind yourself of this. They're without 2 of the best 4. I say this all the time when programs are going through this. Take 2 of the top 4 off of anybody, and they probably got problems. And there's certainly less. The ceiling lowers a bit, at least, and that's what Arkansas is right now with the absence of those 2 players. The only thing that makes me think maybe Arkansas can go win the game is because Auburn hadn't been very good this year. Yeah. I moved Auburn out of the top 25 and 1 after the loss to Memphis. It's a neutral court loss at Atlanta, because I was like, they haven't done anything, and they just lost to a Memphis team that had previously lost to, Seton Hall and St. Louis. So at that point, it didn't make any sense to rank Auburn over Memphis, and I didn't want to rank Memphis yet because I didn't think the resume deserved it. So I just knocked Auburn out, and now I think this coming Monday, people are going to catch up with me, because Auburn has also lost at USC, which is not a bad loss, but USC is a sub-60 KenPom team. And then on Wednesday night, Auburn lost at Georgia by double digits. And so I'm skeptical of how good this Auburn team is, but I do think Auburn is good enough to beat Arkansas, given Arkansas's injury situations and that incredible home court advantage.
the same thing we're saying about Arkansas and injuries is the same thing we were saying about Houston last season.
I know.
And Houston won 32 games, made us look silly. Great coaching. I think they have the depth and the talent to overcome that. So I actually like Arkansas in the spot to win outright. Anthony Black is continuing to be one of the best freshmen in college basketball. Ricky Council's been a revelation, really good transfer. So to your point, I have not been impressed with what I've seen from Auburn. I have been impressed with what I've seen from Arkansas, and despite being a little bit shorthanded, I will ride the must bus on this one here.
So how have I done holding my microphone?
Pretty good. Yeah, no disruptions. I didn't hear any weird noises or anything coming from you. It's pretty impressive. Might deserve a raise and maybe some more Gorilla Glue.
I've got Gorilla Glue, and I've got a broken mic, and I've been Gorilla Gluing my mic together every Friday. Because when I travel back from New York, first off, TSA broke it. I can't name names. I'm just telling you, one day my mic was totally completely intact, and then I traveled with it, and then I landed, and I took the mic out of my suitcase, and it was broken in half. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess, other people are dealing with more serious challenges than that. If this is the worst thing that happens to me today, I'll be fine. Plus, I got Gorilla Glue. So I've been gluing it back together. And this time I'm trying to glue it on top of glue as opposed to glue it together. It's just not, you saw me. If you wonder why we started a few minutes late, it's because I was sitting here trying to Gorilla Glue my mic back together unsuccessfully. And so I think I'm just going to have to break down and get a new one. But I tell you, these TSA folks, I know they have hard jobs, but if they'd have I wanted to test them on my flight home from New York yesterday. So what I did is very carefully, this was all intact. And what I did very carefully is wrap it up in a t-shirt. In other words, when I land, it should still be wrapped up in a t-shirt unless you're just messing with it. So when I landed, opened up my suitcase, not in the t-shirt anymore, and torn apart. I don't think they're intentionally tearing it apart, but like if you handle it recklessly, it will come apart because it's just Gorilla Glued together. And the other one they always get me with, like I travel with medicine. I'm an older guy now. Sometimes you got to take medicine. So I travel with pill bottles and like prescription, like just normal. You're getting older. You need to take these pills every day type stuff. Nothing serious. And they open these bottles and they don't close the caps. I'm not exaggerating. 1 out of every 3 times I travel, when I open my suitcase back up, I have pills just everywhere in my suitcase. Like, what are you doing? Because like that has to be intentional, doesn't it? Because everybody knows how to close a pill bottle. You're just opening it up to inspect it, and then you're not closing it, and you're just that's not the way you should be doing that job. I don't think just spreading people's pills all over their suitcase.
What are the chances that this TSA agent is an IU fan?
I can't say for sure at this point. I mean, but I don't know. Like it's frustrating. You try not to, everybody's got a job to do and you try not to, but like if you open a pill bottle, close it. Is that too much to ask? I don't mind you opening it. I'm not trying to sneak anything through LaGuardia. If you need to open my pill bottles to inspect them, feel free. I got nothing to hide. All I ask, can you close them? Yeah. And if you need to inspect my microphone, that's fine. But can you be gentle with it? Like these things aren't cheap. I mean, I know they look it now, but these things aren't cheap, and they're just breaking them every time. It's crazy to me.
People just don't realize there are more of us than there are of them. They just don't realize.
It's a tough situation. Again, everybody has their challenges in life, but right now, my mortal enemy is TSA, and I like the people who send me. I appreciate TSA pre-check. Love TSA. Watch, I'm gonna get flagged now. They're gonna be inspecting me, patting me down every time. They're gonna start taking. Oh, you want to talk about us on that stupid podcast, huh? Now we gotta pat you down every time you come through security. Fine. I appreciate I appreciate that part of the job. My issues are with the people who are going through my bag and opening pill bottles, not closing them, and not being gentle with my stuff. You should be able to look at a suitcase and say, okay, this guy's traveling with microphone and big board and a lot of stuff. This stuff must be important or else he wouldn't be traveling with it. Just be gentle with it. That shouldn't be too much to ask. Should it? No. Am I over complaining?
No, I think it's fair.
I'm just saying, don't break my stuff. Do your job, but don't break my stuff.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Unreal.
Life's hard, man.
I get it.
Life presents you with challenges every day. We'll get through it though, won't we?
We'll get through it.
I will tell you, my arms get a little tired from holding this mic. I've been holding this stupid thing for an hour.
Tennis elbow's coming back. Gosh.
What if I get muscles from doing this?
God. Bicep popping out. Look at that.
Here's the real problem. Look at this one. If you think that one's something, look at that one right there.
Wow.
I have no muscles. The problem is that I tried to Gorilla Glue it before we started, unsuccessfully, but I still had Gorilla Glue everywhere. So now guess what's going on with my hands? Gorilla Glue all over my hands again. And that's not easy to get off. I've got a hell of a day in front of me. I got a hell of a day in front of me. I got to get Gorilla Glue off. And then I'm taking the kids to SmackDown tonight. We're going to SmackDown. We're going to wrestling tonight. My little guys are fired up. Hopefully I'll get all this Gorilla Glue off my hands, because I'd hate to meet Roman Reigns, shake his hand, and he'd be like, yo, man, you got Gorilla Glue on your hands? That'd be embarrassing.
Someone's asking, can we get you a clap before the show ends? Just a clap to applause us off.
Look, can you see? My hands actually do stick together. You see that? You
got problems, GP. You got problems.
Everybody has challenges in their lives. I know, but right now mine is I got Gorilla Glue hands, and TSA has decided to start picking on me for some reason. I can't make sense of it. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Huck Larnell. Thank you, guys, once again for listening to the Ion College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe. Anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, over at Apple, leave us a 5-star review. Type some words. It needs to be reflected in the comments. There are more of us than there are of them. Appreciate you guys being here. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't. And we're going to talk to you again on Sunday night. We'll see if I can get this thing put back together by then. I got a couple of days. We'll see what I can do. Talk to you Sunday. Till then, take care.